Before Brock Lesnar was in WWE for his second run, he was over in UFC competing as a mixed martial artist. Of course, you all know just how different the WWE and UFC are, and Brock deserves a ton of praise for achieving great success in both. With the milestone UFC 200 coming up, Brock Lesnar decided that he wanted to go back for another fight and was gladly given one against Mark Super Samoan Hunt. So here are 10 things you should know about Brock Lesnar's UFC 200 return. It's no secret that Brock's been out of the UFC game for a while now, and ring rust could definitely be an issue. Just how long, you ask? Well, Brock's last fight was a loss to Alistair Overeem back at UFC 141 in 2011, which has Brock returning to the octagon after 1,653 days. Like I said, this could be a huge factor in Brock's ability inside the cage, and realistically puts him at a big disadvantage. Now this one is subjective, but in my opinion, Brock Lesnar is arguably the biggest draw in the UFC, though some would argue for Conor McGregor, and having him on 200 sealed the deal in making it one of the best UFC cards ever. Don't get me wrong, there are a ton of other awesome fights scheduled as well, such as Edgar and Aldo, DC and Jones, and Tate vs Nunes to name a few, but the clash between Lesnar and Mark Hunt was what solidified this card as possibly the best ever. Only a GSP return could make this any better. Brock definitely had a good run in the UFC, which we'll follow up on later, but if you look at his record alone, it's actually not all that outstanding. Sitting at 5-3 going into his UFC 200 bout, Brock captured wins over some notable opponents like Frank Mir, Shane Carwin, and Randy Couture. However, towards the end of his career, Brock lost 2 in a row to Cain Velasquez and Alistair Overeem. The worst part is that both were first round stoppages and simply made Lesnar look weak and outclassed. Hold up, don't start assuming Brock is a terrible fighter or anything. Well, you've probably already heard, Brock suffered from a digestive disease called diverticulitis. The painful disease affected Lesnar's performance by hindering his training and athletic ability. Lesnar even underwent surgery, which likely saved his life in 2011, where he had part of his colon removed. Brock has gone on record saying that the last time he fought at 100% was the Randy Couture fight, and that he went downhill from there. At UFC 200, Brock Lesnar will be fighting at 100% for the first time in years. Speaking of the Randy Couture fight at UFC 91, that was the site of Brock Lesnar's UFC title win. Brock was awarded this fight with a UFC record of just 1-1, coming off a win over Heath Herring, and many felt it was premature and a marketing ploy. However, Brock proved his worth by defeating The Natural by TKO to become the UFC heavyweight champion in his 4th ever professional fight. This showed everybody Brock was a real competitor in the MMA world, and his return shouldn't be taken lightly either. Brock Lesnar is a big dude, so it's only natural that people accuse him of taking steroids. However, the UFC and the United States Anti-Doping Agency have added fuel to that fire by granting Lesnar a drug test exemption prior to his UFC 200 bout. The general policy states that fighters returning to the octagon must be available for drug testing up to 4 months prior to a fight, but Brock only made himself available in early June. Even his opponent, Mark Hunt, blatantly called Brock a cheater, though he says he's just one of many. Brock responded by saying, "I'm a white boy and I'm jacked. Deal with it." Now, although nothing has been publicly stated, it's fair to say WWE will want a UFC star to make an appearance in exchange for Brock being allowed to fight. More on that next. Many are speculating that this won't be Ronda Rousey, but instead either Conor McGregor or even more likely Paige Van Zandt. Of course, Conor McGregor has become one of the biggest sports stars on the planet, and he would fit right in there with his fellow Irishmen Sheamus and Finn Balor. But Van Zandt arguably has more mainstream appeal, as she's appeared on and nearly won the past season of Dancing with the Stars. You've probably been wondering, how is Brock fighting at UFC 200 if he's under contract with WWE anyways? Well, turns out WWE has agreed to let Brock fight for a one-off bout with the UFC and fully expect him to return in time for SummerSlam. The motivation behind this is a bit unclear to me, but rumors are saying Brock negotiated such a clause in his contract when he re-signed. Because in reality, Brock's win doesn't do all that much for WWE, as I don't imagine too many fans crossing over from MMA, and if he loses, it might hurt his image as the unstoppable beast. If you've seen my video on the highest paid WWE superstars, you know Brock makes quite a bit of money. However, the potential UFC 200 payday for a single night of doing what he loves could net Lesnar around $10 million. That's right, Brock could make more than his yearly WWE salary in a single night. Where did I get this number from? Well, let's look at UFC 196 when Conor McGregor fought Nate Diaz. McGregor was given a base salary of $1 million just for showing up. Also, with around 1.5 million pay-per-view buys, McGregor walked away with a total of $10 million. Considering how big of an event UFC 200 is, and the fact he's its biggest draw, I'd be shocked if Lesnar didn't make close to that same figure. You didn't think I'd go this whole video without talking about his opponent, did you? Mark Hunt may not look as physically imposing as Lesnar, but trust me when I say Hunt is not an opponent to be taken lightly. Hunt has proven himself to be one of the best overall strikers in the UFC heavyweight division and is considered the hardest hitter as well. He comes from a kickboxing background and is even known as the king of the walk-off KO. No, he's not as good of a wrestler as Brock, but his takedown defense has gotten quite good, while his stand-up game is on another level. I see this fight going one of two ways. Either Hunt knocks out Lesnar clean and quick, or Lesnar gets Hunt down for a ground and pound TKO win. Either way, it'll be a fight to remember. And those are 10 things you should know about Brock Lesnar's UFC 200 return. How do you see the fight going down? I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. Also, if you're up for it, give me your predictions for the other top fights as well. As always, thanks for watching.